Adventures in Imperfect Living.
Greetings, folks. I'm Greg Willits from RosaryArmy.com.
And I'm Jennifer Willits, his wife.
And we're recording this episode for you right now on a Friday evening. So you know what that means? It means that we're going to enjoy ourselves a little bit.
Means we were driven to this?
No, we weren't quite driven to it. I did shake it.
I was driven to
I
this.
shook it more than that. Yeah, you've had a week.
Literally.
You've had more of a week than me, but
Yeah.
I did shake that martini shaker a little bit more earlier today. Oh, my goodness gracious. That looks like almost on a professional level. Just like the ice crystals just barely floating on the top of my martini with 2 olives. Last 2 olives in the house. I don't know how long those olives have been in the fridge. So that's.
But can they really go bad ever?
I mean, that's my fear. Is that
they're
that might be all I can get out of that
soaking
shaker.
in preservative liquid.
Man, oh man.
Which is perpetual liquid, is what these things are.
If you're
right?
watching on YouTube, you tell me. Does that look like a good martini? I think that's a good looking
looks pretty good.
vodka martini. Cheers,
It's pretty good.
baby.
Okay, cheers.
I will tell you
Ah.
right out of the gate that oh my goodness gracious, that's a good martini. I will tell you, ever since you came home, you just look really good to me today.
Really?
You look really. You, my wife of almost 29 years. I'm just going, man. You're like, just.
It's. I'm wearing boots. You can't see the
Yeah,
boots.
the
But
boots.
I'm wearing boots, and
And
he likes boots.
And you got a pretty skirt on, and your hair is straight this week.
I did.
And you
I
got
did
the
a
little
straight
bob
hair.
thing going on in the back. Maybe that's it. This is like
it's the little
it's like this little flirtatious bounce thing going on. So
flirtatious bounce thing.
Every time you're walking away, I just see that little bounce of silver hair, and I keep going. Eh.
See, because you imagine when I'm in a classroom, this is what the students see.
Now remember,
I'm writing on the board. They see the back of my
yeah,
head.
not most people are
So
listening.
That's it. That's right.
Well,
We
only have
you're
50
missing out then if
the-
you're not watching us on YouTube.
The
That's all
50
I'm saying.
people watching us on YouTube just benefited from that, but the other
All I am saying.
the others just had to imagine it from the magic of podcasting. So
And their imagination.
So we're hanging out with you on this Friday, and we're glad that you're with us as we're just we have some stories that we wanted to tell each other. I have a couple stories from today that I have not told you, and I intentionally held off telling you because I wanted you to know this story.
Okay. So why don't we just jump in and you tell me what happened to you today?
Well. I mean, but see, I kind of feel like I feel like that's the last story of the day. Let's talk about a little bit
Okay.
earlier in the week. I mean, so this is going to be a Talky Talk show. We haven't done one of these in a while. Earlier in the week, we had some guests over. I got a text late last week from our dear friend Captain Jeff, and longtime listeners to whatever shows that we've done will remember Captain Jeff from our old SQPN days. He was involved very early on with Father Roderick and I and you, and then we met Captain Jeff on the same day that we met Mac Barron. And so that was in 2006 at the Eucharistic Congress in Atlanta, and then we've been friends with them ever since. So we've been friends with both, Mac and Catherine and Captain Jeff for 18 years now. And we don't get to see Captain Jeff as often as we'd like. He's now a retired airline pilot. We call him Captain Jeff. I feel like we have this habit of calling him Captain Jeff.
We do.
And he said it a couple of times when he was here the other night. He goes, "You don't have to say Captain. You don't."
I'm just Jeff now.
I'm just Jeff, and we're just like, okay, just Jeff. But that sounds weird. I'd rather call you Captain Jeff than just Jeff. So he texted me and let me know that someone was going to be in town, and it would be a good opportunity for us to meet this person. And so Jeff does a show for aviation aficionados called the Airline Pilot Guy. Started as the Catholic Pilot Guy, and then he just said, well, this is mostly about aviation and not really about Catholicism. He brings it up. He doesn't hold back in talking about his faith. But over the years, he has partnered up with a lot of other either pilots or aviation aficionados or people who just are really interested in it. And Airline Pilot Guy, they've developed their own audience. And for several years now, I don't remember when it started. I think it was since we've moved back here to Atlanta. I got an email years ago from this guy, Captain Nick, over in England. And Captain Nick was now a part of the Airline Pilot Guy show, and he had this segment that he would do on the show, and I didn't realize this, it is its own standalone podcast. So if you like just stories about aviation, go check out the Old Man's Plane Tales. It might just be Plane Tales. I don't know. Not Old Man. Sorry, Jeff. Or sorry, Nick. Old Pilot's Plane Tales. So that's what it's called on Airline Pilot Guy. And every once in a while, he would send me an email and say, "Hey, I need an American accent. Can you read these 3-4 lines?" And I just pull out the mic and I'd record it and I'd send him a file and say, "There you go." And it's kind of fun for me because it's so different than anything that I do. It's different than any audiobooks. It's different than our podcast. It's just sort of like most of the time I don't even know who the pilots or the airline personnel, because it could be like some engineer or something that worked in a factory. I don't know who these people are. And so I'll go and sometimes I do a little bit of research. I'll see if there's any evidence of video or audio of them on YouTube. And if there is, I'll try to mimic their voice a little bit. So that's a fun little thing. Well, Captain Nick, who lives in England, was coming over for a get-together gathering of the Airline Pilot Guy crew. And so he was going to be in town, and Jeff had asked, could we get together for dinner or whatever? I said, well, I asked you. I said, why don't we just have him over for dinner? And Jeff has had our tacos before. So, Jeff, why don't you bring him over for tacos? And so we had two illustrious retired airline pilots come over to our house, Captain Nick and Captain Jeff, and had just a great time. It was wonderful seeing Jeff again, as always. But Nick is just a gentleman, felt like an immediate old friend having him in the house. Brought a bottle of scotch that I'd never had before. It's Talisker, which I've had Talisker scotch, but it was like Talisker. It wasn't not Talisker Spice. What is it? Storm?
Yeah, Talisker Storm.
Talisker Storm. I had no idea what the storm was. We were reading the box. We're trying to figure out, well, what makes it storm? They just said it has spice. I don't know what, but it was so good. It was some tasty scotch. And I don't drink a ton of scotch. I have a couple of bottles of scotch, and I divvy it out. I'm very, very stingy with my scotch drinking because it's so dang expensive, number one, for the scotch that I like, that I won't drink it very often. But so then Mac came over because Mac knows Captain Jeff as well, and unfortunately
we tried to get Catherine.
Yeah, she was working. Unfortunately,
she had to go and work.
So
whatever.
Mac had some of the scotch. Captain Nick had some of the scotch. I had some of the scotch. Jeff doesn't like scotch, so he just watched us drink.
I smelled it. It was enough.
I mean, but I tell you what,
but that's not my drink. Not at all.
It was very tasty. But it was just great seeing them.
It was such a unique moment in our life. Like I was telling, I think it was you after the evening had already ended, that what a blessed life we live with this podcasting that we've been doing for so many years, that we have had the opportunity to, not in real life, but virtually meet a great many different people over the last couple of decades, that we're so delightfully surprised when we get to actually meet them in real life. And we never can predict who we're going to meet or when this meeting is going to occur.
But it's always fun.
But it's always fun when it actually happens. And Lily was kind of excited because she'd never met a real British person, like actively living in England, came over to visit. And so she could hear a real proper, British accent. And she just was in awe of hearing all the wonderful stories that Captain Nick is very in love with saying. He is so good and talented at his storytelling craft. And then it was just so funny just listening to the two captains bantering back and forth. Now, they're both retired, actually, so it's just kind of Nick and Jeff, but they were just kind of hilarious. They definitely, you can see why they have a podcasting rapport with one another. And we were just having this wonderful time, and I was so grateful that Mac was there too. And I could tell that his little Anglophile bucket was being, checked, because he has a love of England, as I know Catherine does too. So I was so sad that she couldn't be there with us to enjoy this evening. But it was great. And I told Lily, it's like, Lily, I was trying to prepare her for this dinner. It's like, this is going to be like a very man kind of night. It's like no kids. You and I, Lily, literally are the only females in the room. So what we're going to do is we're going to be like a floral accent to their nights. We are going to represent femininity to all their masculinity. So we're going to just be a part of their conversation, add to it, ask questions, and Lily's been curious about a couple of things about planes. And so she got to ask, real experts in the field, like, what are these things that I keep seeing in the sky? Like, what's going on with that? And they're so patient and loving, and they just were happy to talk and teach. And it was just such a delightful evening, everything about it.
Now, when you talked about his accent, it reminded me that I actually, we had a little payback going on when he was, when we were recording a few years ago, our Fiat audio drama for our podcast. And I wanted kind of a distinguished introductory voice on the podcast. And we actually had, I had Captain Nick.
The following presentation
This is him.
So this is his
brought to
voice.
you by rosaryarmy.com. Making, praying, and giving away all twine-knotted rosaries, and encouraging others to do the same.
He's so sophisticated sounding.
I mean, you
it's
really
like
kind of
just-
expected him to have a pipe the whole time that he was talking to us.
He made me want to smoke a pipe just
Oh,
because he was there.
Great.
So, if you've never heard that audio drama, by the way, which we did a few years ago, you can go over to rosaryarmy.com and just search for Fiat, and it's over there. FIAT, like Mary's yes, right? So anyway, so that was great.
So good. The
to
food
catch
was
up.
great. We hadn't had tacos like that
Yeah.
in a long time. That used to be our thing, the taco parties, and we just don't do them as much anymore.
I'll be honest, I don't enjoy them as much anymore.
Really?
I mean, they're still good, but they don't have the same wow factor because after a while, it's like it was still good, but it just I don't know, something's missing. I don't know what it is. So you had a busy week. You have been already, we've talked about this a little bit, you've been filling in and helping out a lot more with your
Yeah.
Latin class at Lily's school. You've been filling in for the high school main Latin teacher who is on maternity leave right now, but there was another teacher that came in, a full-time teacher, and he was teaching, and then he left, leaving the kind of like this open gap week that someone needed to be running 6 Latin classes 3 times this week. So
Yeah.
you basically were basically you had to teach 3 days worth of classes for a total of 18 classes total. That's
18 Latin classes
at 3 different levels.
in a high school. Yeah, levels 1, 2, and 3. And I have to say, I have a lot of respect for teachers. What they do is not easy at all, and it requires an enormous amount of stamina. You have to really sort of pace your energy so that you can make it and still be fresh at the end of a long day, so that the student who sees you for the first time at 2:30, you want to be fully present to that kid because they deserve that. That's their first time seeing you. So I really have a lot of respect for what teachers do day in and day out. But it was a unique opportunity. I was not surprised when they asked me to fill in. And honestly, I think I was their closest solution. It's really, really hard to find a Latin substitute who has all the foundational knowledge under their belt to teach so many different levels of Latin inside of one day, one side of school day. But because I had witnessed her methods and her protocol for several months, and then before she departed for maternity leave, I was able to increase and step up my skills in the administrative side with managing the classroom with the substitute teacher. So that kind of prepared me at another level. So then when it came up to this final need, which is the highest level I could possibly attain, was to simply try to hold the fort for 1 week. That's all I had to do. Is I see the plan, I just execute the plan, and I try to provide limited guidance to the students, but they know me, they're comfortable with me, and I'm comfortable with them. I was right at home. It just worked out that I could fulfill this really small little need, but boy, I learned a lot in just 3 days, which is, for our school, that represents 1 week of instruction. So it was kind of great, but I'm looking forward to Maria coming back. Please come back, right? You're coming back. You're going to hear this, and you're coming back, and you're bringing that baby with you.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's not just that she's going to be returning, but I've never heard of a teacher coming back to the school with the baby. But this
That's
is
because we're in a Catholic homeschool.
And
this
so-
is what we do.
so
When
sh-
teachers get pregnant, they bring their babies back until the baby's old enough to be weaned or have another set of childcare arrangements.
And how confident are you that you're going to get to hold that baby during?
I'm fairly confident that that, and I was trying to explain the situation to our oldest son, Sam, when talking with him the other night, that we're going to be like a new kind of a team, a new kind of teaching duo. So if she needs to step out of the classroom to do baby things, I could step up and do Latin-y things.
Well, that's
and
not
then
fair.
We'll switch.
That's not fair.
If she needs
It's not
to
fair.
resume her Latin-y things, I'll do baby things. And we'll just keep switching around back and forth until we have all baby and Latin things accomplished in one day.
How do you say
It'll be
baby in
great.
Latin? Infantus?
Infans is
Infans?
yeah, like infant. Infans.
I went down the right path though, trying to.
I'm
just
glad.
kinda figure
I mean, that was a question that was asked months ago, so I'm really grateful that I remembered it on the spot.
So
Anyway,
you've been
so it's been intense.
you've been noticeably more tired this week.
Yeah, that was. I think that Tuesday was our first day back in class, and so you have to understand, it's not as if I was just coming off of the week before. We were coming out of a 2 to what felt like a 3-week break. We had all the high school was pretty much shut down for a retreat. And then we had Holy Week, and then we had spring break. So we're all sort of acclimated to being, I don't want to say lazy, but we're acclimated to being low energy. We're in a restful state. We're forgetting Latin, basically. We're not thinking about our academics anymore. So that first day back from a long break is understandably a little jarring. So it's jarring just to be a TA to come back in from a big break, just like it is after Christmas break. You just it takes a day or two to get the wheels sort of churning again. It's like, okay, this is the routine. Let's get back into it. So I had that in the background as to why it felt like a little bit more of a heavy lift, was because not only was I being jarred by the fact that I had just come out of a break and now going into an intense situation, but I was also responsible. And I think that was really the biggest weight, was just feeling the weight of responsibility that 120 kids are looking at you for, what are we doing today, Mrs. Willits? What would you like me to do? How can I comply with the Latin? And I needed to be there confidently and executing all the plans.
And the potential for their educational futures to be obliterated was very strong this week. If you didn't step up to the plate.
Well,
I mean, everything that's going to happen for the rest of their lives hinged upon this week's Latin lessons.
No.
So that is a fairly hefty weight to have on your shoulders.
I was a bridge. I was a bridge between two worlds, between the substitute and the main teacher. They just needed a little connection. And I'm like, okay, I'll try to hold it up. And I felt like I did a pretty decent job.
Well, one might say it's a bridge too far.
But it was fun, and I had a good time. I felt confident and calm, so I was grateful to our Lord in heaven who helped me get through the week gracefully, and I had plenty of support. It was kind of fun seeing every hour I would have a new administrative staff member basically reprising my role of being a TA, so they were a TA for me. And that was kind of,
They were all checking up on you.
They're probably making sure I wasn't misleading the students, But I think I did a pretty good job. It was really cute. I just want to brag about Lily for one moment. On Tuesday, that was the first day back.
It's our daughter.
After the break.
For first-time listeners.
And
or
so
watchers.
she is a freshman at this high school, and she's in year 1 of Latin. So I do actually have Lily in class at some point in the day. And when it came time for lunchtime, I packed my lunch like she packs her lunch. We always do this the night before. So that makes the morning of going to school a lot easier. So my lunchtime is finally upon me. I was still a little shell-shocked from my first day in of really taking on the level of responsibility and trying to be calm and execute the plan well. And when I finally sat down at the end of the day to eat, I was so exhausted. I just wanted to turn my little lunchbox into a pillow and just sleep. I mean, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just want to go to sleep. I don't care about food. I just want to go to sleep. But I had to eat. I needed the energy. So I'm going through my lunchbox, and there's everything that I put in the night before, except there was just one little square yellow piece of paper all folded up And immediately, I did not put that thing in there. This is a foreign object in my lunchbox.
So you thought your husband was being romantic, and you immediately had just
Somebody
assumed.
was giving me a note.
But
So
no.
there was a heart on. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so I opened it up, and it was Lily.
Yeah.
She gave me a little,
She's-
dear Mom, I love you. You're going to do great today as a teacher.
Totally
you
showed
got
me up.
this,
Showed up by our 15-year-old daughter. That's what happened.
It just meant so much to me to get that little surprise love note. And I returned the love note back like a couple days later, and I made sure that I slipped one into her lunchbox. And it just means a lot. It just lifts you up a little bit to get that note of confidence. And I almost cried. I mean, I was just like so tired and hungry.
I
was
hate
like,
that.
"Whoa."
I hate when you're tired and something emotional happens, how it
Hits you
hits you,
harder.
and that you're being overreactive at that moment, but you still are reacting more strongly than you would like to. It's not that you wouldn't get emotional, but it's just sort of like that this is more emotional than you should be getting, and then that makes it almost like your reaction gets even worse. Then it's like, I shouldn't even be crying. Why am I crying?
But it feels so
yeah,
right
it just gets worse.
to cry right now.
No.
So yeah, I survived. So thank you for your support. You've been dealing with me being tired and wanting to go to bed like at 8.
I'm just sort of whatever you wanted. I'm like, okay. No conflict this week for me. That was my
so
number one
good.
goal, was no conflict.
Okay.
So this year, I don't know how quite to start these next couple stories. This year it's 2024 has had a surprising amount of deaths of people who have kind of been on our radar, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily people that we talk to all the time, but every month so far this year, we've known someone to die.
Yeah. One
And-
family member and then a lot of people that we just know.
Yeah.
Either they're in our circle somehow, whether through school, through church, that kind of thing.
And so last night, I found out that someone that I knew years ago, and I'm talking like 30 plus years ago, I found out that he died in January. And we were watching a movie last night, and I just saw a guy that reminded me of this guy who hired me at a comic book store that I worked at when I was in college in Cincinnati. And his name was Brian. And I was just like, and Brian and I reconnected on social media, I don't know, 10 plus years ago. And as soon as I saw a picture of him, I just looked at him and I'm like, oh, he had, I don't want to say gained weight. He looked like he gained weight in such a way that when you see a heart attack candidate, he looked
like comorbidity
yeah,
level.
he
of
looked like that,
unhealthy,
right? So it's like his
yeah.
cheeks had a ruddiness to it that made me worried. He just looked very tight in his roundness, right? And he wasn't like that when I knew him. And so for years, I've always thought, I would not be surprised if he died suddenly. And then apparently he did. And so he died in January. I just found that out last night. And again, I haven't even traded an email with him probably in 10 years. But then, we had a nephew that died in January as well. The following month, a priest in the Archdiocese of Atlanta died, who I had known my whole life. And that made me really sad because that particular priest, who is a priest who I had a great amount of love for, also led us astray. I don't think necessarily willingly, but I think he accepted a lot of non-Catholic teachings. I mean, he was wishy-washy on some of the faith. And so he gave us bad advice when we went to him early on in our marriage to ask about contraception. And then he died. And that made me very sad because, there's a certain level of culpability that a priest will have when he dies. Did he feed the flock? Did he lead the flock closer or further away from Jesus? And so I can't say one way or the other where he was, but he was a well-known priest in the Archdiocese of Atlanta that died. And I think it impacted me knowing that he was gone. And the fact that he had told us that contraception was a matter of conscience, and yet the Catholic Church does not teach that. Yet this priest, who I respected, did. I mean, it's a priest who he went and saw Star Wars Episode 1 with you and I on opening day. When I was a little kid living here in Atlanta, he celebrated Mass at our house. There was but I think he was ordained in the late 60s. There was a lot of late 60s, early 70s wishy-washiness, and he just never was washed of it. So that was something that hit. And then in March, a woman who had meant a great deal to me, she was my parents' age, but she meant a great deal to me when I was in high school. She died. Her name was Sandy, and she was in Cincinnati. I had a really bad car accident when I was 16. Totaled my car, shattered my nose in this car accident. And when I was standing outside of my car, which was practically wrapped around a tree, and I'm standing in the road just kind of screaming what happened to my car, and blood's covered my shirt and rushing down my face. Sandy never went down this road, and she never was down there, especially at that time of the day. And just that day, for whatever reason, she had to go down that road. And other kids from the high school drove by and actually laughed when they saw the wreck. Sandy stopped. Sandy kept me calm until I got into the ambulance. So she died in March. And so that kind of built up. And then, last night finding out about that friend that died back in January, but then also a friend of ours, his mother died just recently. And I think we might have met his mom once years ago, right before our friend was getting married. And so our friend Andy, who I worked with Andy, I was trying to remember. I know that I got that job. It was in, I believe, in 1996. And so I met Andy for the first time in 1996. I think he was like one of the only 2 or 3 Catholics that worked at it. It was Lotus Software. We were doing tech support for Lotus 123 and other software. And Andy, if you remember, if you're a longtime listener to the podcast, when we were living in Indiana, we had a dear friend, Mike Mackay, come and visit us. And we hadn't seen Mike in a long time either. Mike has Parkinson's. He's been fighting Parkinson's for years. And he came and he was on the show one time. And so Mike and Andy know each other. And Andy and another different Michael and you and I, we used to go over to our friend Mike's house and we do jam sessions. We drink beer and play guitar, and Andy played bass, and we just jam out and sing songs and have a great old time, and just a great time, right? It was right before children. And then when Sam was born, our first son, Andy came over and brought this gargantuanly huge dog bear looking thing that we had for years at our house, a stuffed animal.
Stuffed animal, right?
No, a real dog bear that Andy
we feed to this day.
Yeah, it's still
he lives out in the back.
Yeah, every time you've heard us talk about Walter, it's a dog bear. That's like, so Andy is just he's been a part of our lives for a while. Of course, then he gets married and he has kids, and then we got married, and we were already married when we met, but we kept having kids, and we were living in different parts of Atlanta, and we moved around. Didn't see Andy for many years. Would see him every once in a while at the Eucharistic Congress. He came and saw when we spoke. He had a Rosary Army t-shirt. I didn't realize that he had, but he bought one year at the Eucharistic Congress. And just a super great guy. I mean, I even remember when we were getting ready to move back to Atlanta, and we announced that on, I don't know where it was, Facebook or somewhere. Right away, Andy was like, hey, even if you need me to drive up to Indiana to help you move, I'll do it. I mean, he's just the kind of guy who he would drop anything to help out a friend. And Andy's mom died a week and a half ago.
During Holy Week.
Yeah, during Holy Week. And just knew that I wanted to do whatever I could, just because he's been so kind time and time again, and wanted to be there for him. And he's just had a rough time of things anyway in the last year, and losing his mom, she's been battling Alzheimer's. So if you pray for Miss Sandy, that would be great. If you would do that for his family, pray for the repose of her soul. She had been fighting Alzheimer's for 14 years, and particularly the last few years were especially tough. But just a nice funeral. I tell you, I thought it was kind of a nice way of doing it. The priest, before the actual mass began, the priest invited one of Andy's brothers and his sister to come up, and he says it's his tradition, the priest's tradition, before the actual celebration of the funeral mass, at that moment, give someone the opportunity to tell you a little bit about the person who we are praying for that day.
At what point?
Before the mass actually began. So there was a processional song, but the priest hadn't said, let's begin in the name of the Father. So he hadn't said that yet, right? So we're already assembled. There was a processional song, but then he had. So I like that, because it's not proper to Catholic Mass to have a eulogy within the right, exactly.
Okay. And did you mention that the last time you were at this parish
was
for our son Walter's and Holly's wedding?
I did not.
Same
not
parish.
That. So yeah, it was the first
wedding
time.
And funeral. Yeah.
First time in 6 months that I've been back to this particular parish, and his brother and sister did a great job. It might have been one of the nicest remembrances I've heard. It was very well done. It's very hard for children, I think, adult children to keep their composure when doing this kind of thing, and they did. I think his brother got choked up at one point, but they traded out lines. So they
were standing side by side.
They stood side by
okay.
side, and the sister would say one line, and then the brother said the next line, and so they were reading it. It was obvious, but they did such a good job; it didn't really feel like they were reading it.
Okay.
And it painted a very nice picture of their mom. I thought it was very lovely. So it was a very nice funeral mass. I thought it was very respectful. It was well turned out.
Did you recognize the priest, or was it a different priest?
I did not. No, it was not the priest who did Walter and Holly's marriage. I don't know the Monsignor's name, but then there were two other priests that were concelebrating. And when I went up to go receive the Eucharist, I'm always a little self-conscious when I go to different parishes. I've just gotten to where I receive kneeling and on the tongue, and no one else was kneeling. I saw a lot of people receive on the tongue, but I kneeled. And I try to read people's faces. I don't know if like the priest is going, oh, what's this guy doing? But the priest was considerably shorter than me, and so I also do it to help the priest, quite honestly, because otherwise he's reaching up, and it's like I don't want him feeling like he's trying to, slam dunk the Eucharist into my mouth,
or his thumb touching your lip or tongue. Those are the concerns when they're.
Yeah,
when you're taller than.
So I felt like I confused him a little bit, and I didn't recognize this priest. So then there's a reason why I bring that up. After Mass,
but it was successful.
Oh yeah, sure.
The priest.
No, it was fine. That was fine. That was fine.
Okay.
So then after Mass, I go out. I'm in the narthex, and I went up to we have a local Catholic radio that's not that old. It's about 6 years old, and I had dealt with those people a lot right after we moved here, and I did some side work for them when we first got here. And so the woman who founded it, Carol, was there. And when I walked in, she was talking to Andy. And I was like, I said to Andy,
they know each
other.
other.
I forgot about that. I said to Andy, I'm like, I didn't know you knew Carol. And he goes, well, I help out at the radio station. I'm like, that's right. I totally forgot about that. So, but then Carol went inside and she sat in the front, and I did, guess where I sat? In the back.
In the very back row.
If I'm by myself, I'm
close to the exit.
Yeah, pretty much. That's where I sat. And so I waited for Carol to come out so I could say hello. And I was talking to Carol, and just, I was explaining how I knew Andy and all that. And there was this other woman that was standing there, and she like kind of is looking at me, and she said, I thought she knew Carol. I thought she was there with Carol, actually. And then she just said, Are you a Willits? And I said, I am. She goes, okay, I didn't know if you were a Willits or a Witzik, because Witzik was another family.
Oh, boy.
And I'm like, yes, I'm Greg Willits. She goes, I thought you were. Her name is Jean, and Jean is the oldest daughter of Deacon Jack Jansen.
I'm not surprised.
And so we've told stories about Deacon Jack. So to counter that priest who died in February, who said it was okay to use contraception.
Okay.
This woman's dad, and I said this to her today. I said I tell this to people all the time. I said, your dad is responsible for 3 of our 5 children. Because it was his.
Oh, that sounds so scandalous.
I said it was your dad's homily is what opened our eyes and helped us to accept the church's truthful, beautiful, gorgeous teachings on openness to life and how it can improve marriages and how it can actually bring greater joy in your life if you can learn to accept that teaching, even with all of its struggles. And I think our marriage is a testament to it hasn't always been easy raising our children, and it hasn't been easy losing the children that we lost. But I wouldn't trade any of it, and I feel much closer to you, and that's the joy of being open to life. And so this is Jean, and she's the oldest of the 9 children.
Really?
And,
that's
and
so
I'd
awesome.
never gotten to meet her before.
Lives right around the corner.
Her mom lives right around the corner where Andy's mom lived.
I wonder if they knew each other.
I don't know. I don't know if there
world.
would have been a familiarization there.
Yeah.
But so I gave Jean some Rosary Army stickers, and she said, "Well, give me some for my mom." I said, "There you go." And I gave her the daily consecration prayer card that we had made up to send out to donors during our last giving campaign. I had some of those with me, and so I gave those to her. And so that's the first story. So I got to meet I told her I said I don't take me on my word for this, because I can't always remember what I said in different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But I told her, I said, we're going to be on EWTN again on Monday night on the journey home. And so by the time you're listening to this, it would have been last week, and you could still go online and watch this. And last week's episode, you would have seen our conversation with Matt Swaim, who helps with the operations behind the scenes with the journey home on EWTN. But I said, I'm almost positive I mentioned your dad again. It's like the last 2 times I've been on EWTN, I talk about Deacon Jack Jansen and how his homily and that bold, difficult teaching that he preached during his homily changed our lives forever. So I told her to look out for that. So that was pretty cool meeting her. I was pretty excited. So now I've met 4 of their 9 in that family. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So that was the story number 1. But as I'm talking to Jean, as I'm saying there, Carol is still off to my right. And the priest who I received the Eucharist from comes up, and he's talking to Carol. And I hear mumble, 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 mumble. Is that the guy from Rosary Army? Mumble, 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 mumble. And I'm trying to focus on what Jean's saying at this point.
But your ear is already kind of listening.
Anytime I hear, is that the guy?
Is that the something Willis?
No. Is that the guy? I immediately just go on to high alert. Like, what did I do? What am I about to feel guilty for now? And so I turn, and it's the priest I received from, and he's still in his vestments. And he says, "Do you remember me?" Which I'm sorry, I hate that question, because
you don't.
I probably don't, but it's nothing personal, right?
Yeah.
I've been married to you for 29 years. We were married.
And you forget me.
We were married 16 years before I remembered your name. No. And so do you remember me? No. Tell me your name again. And he tells me his name.
Did that help?
Well, maybe a little bit, but I'm looking at him, and the fact that he felt like I should know who he is. And then he said, I can't remember if he said, "You came and spoke at our parish." But I don't think he said that. I don't think he said that. I think he just said his name. And then like the Holy Spirit went, "Hey, Greg, so that you don't look like an idiot, the answer you're looking for is, you spoke at his church to the teens." And I went, "You were at the most eastern parish in the Archdiocese of Atlanta." And he goes, "Yes." And it was like 20 years ago. So go back, all right? In the early days of Rosary Army, I'm doing whatever I can to get traction.
Right.
Rosary Army had been around 4 months, and
wow.
the Steubenville Conference was in Atlanta, but it wasn't as big then as it is now. And it was he said, "You were over at Blessed Trinity." I don't remember that it was Blessed Trinity, but I remember going to some Catholic school somewhere, and I had our giant rosary, and I had a bunch of twine, and I had a bunch of rosaries, and I went up there, and he reminded me that he came up to me and said, "Let me have that rosary." He wanted the giant rosary. I'm like, "I'm not going to give you that giant rosary." I said, "I'll teach you how to make one, though." And so I gave him some twine and some instructions there on that day. So this was 20 years ago, this priest, right, who was there, who brought his teens from his parish on the far eastern parish in Thompson, Georgia, or something like that. So as I'm talking to him today, I said, well, you know what? At first I was going and I was speaking to a lot of youth groups, and then I realized, it took me a couple of years, but I realized I'm not going to speak to youth groups anymore, because I would go and teach these teens how to make them, and the teens weren't the ones that it would take. It was their parents. And so I wanted to start speaking to more adults. He goes, "Well, it took that day." And I went, "Yeah." And he reaches behind his vestments and into his pocket, and he pulled out this giant wad of cardinal red number 36 nylon twine. And Gene, standing off to the side, says, he sits in the confessional and whips those things out.
Oh, wow.
He made over 700 last year. His goal, he makes over 700 all twine knotted rosaries a year. He sits in the confessional and makes them and gives them away and gives them away and gives them away. Gives them away by the hundreds. And I'm telling you what, here's this priest who probably thought I was a nut when I got on my knees to receive the Eucharist today. But 20 years ago, I told him, here, take some twine and learn how to make these. And who knows how many thousands he's given away. He is the priest or one of the priests in residence over at that retirement home.
Oh,
He lives there now. So he's over there making those rosaries. So I had 2 close encounters of the rosary kind this afternoon, and I didn't expect either one of them. And it was very, I don't hold on to the good as much as I should, which actually reminds me of something I wanted to bring up on the podcast. And I didn't have this written down, but this reminds me. Your voicemails, to you listening and you watching, your voicemails, we miss them. We haven't gotten any in a while because we don't encourage you to do it, right? We don't tell you, hey, pull out your phone and open up your voice memos app and record something and email it to us. Send it to feedback@gregandjennifer.com. We haven't said that for a while. Lately, we went a couple of weeks over Holy Week where we didn't do a podcast, and part of it was because you and I couldn't figure out what to talk about.
Right,
and
we needed to rest. We're still a little burnt out.
But even today, after that funeral, I told you I have stories, but I'm not going to tell you them until we go on the show because it's really hard to tell the same stories twice. And so, at least for me, it is. And so it was nice that I had a couple of stories to share with you, and then it felt fresh in retelling the story because this is the first time I've told the story. But one of our favorite things to do is answer your questions and to respond to your feedback. And I know that when we went to the video, we said that if you wanted to upload a video, that we'd play your video. And I know a lot of people don't want their video. They don't want to be seen on our YouTube. But I get that. If you do want to do that, you could rosaryarmy.wetransfer.com. You can upload it that way. But your voicemails, we still miss them. And it just made me realize when I heard this priest's story today, because of how quickly and easily I tend to forget the good and I immediately move on to the next problem that has to get solved, that I live in a constant problem-solving mode, that sometimes I don't realize that solutions have already been provided and are being lived out in the world as a result of the work that we're doing. And the fact that here's this priest who's making rosaries while waiting to hear confessions, and he's giving away these rosaries by the hundreds every year. I needed to hear that today. And
yeah, it's a reminder that just because you can't see the fruit does not mean the fruit wasn't being born. And he was there to tell you that, but fruit was born.
Well, I know fruit's being born. I know fruit's being born. Sometimes I want to see it too. And we don't always get to. Well, I'm just saying.
We don't get to see
I'm just saying that it was nice to be able to see a little bit of the fruit today. And I feel like when we hear from you, we feel the fruit a little bit because we know that you're being edified by the podcast. When you share the podcast with other people and we hear from those people, it's very edifying. When we see your comments on the YouTube channel, it's very edifying. And it reminds us that these little stories that we share, sometimes they hit home. Maybe it's something that you connect to. Maybe it's something that can change your life. I don't know what, but so those are my stories. I thought that was pretty cool. I was pretty.
Oh man, that is wonderful.
I really
you went. I wish I could have been there with you.
Yeah.
But it was during the school day, so I could not leave them without any Latin teacher at all.
I told Andy. I told him that you wanted to be there, but that you had to be at work at Lily School. So listen. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking time. If you haven't watched our appearance on EWTN and you want to know a little bit of the backstory, particularly Jennifer's story of how she came into the church and her long journey into the Catholic Church, we will share that on our website. So a link to that should already be there by the time you're watching this. Or you can go check out the Journey Homes YouTube channel and see it there or on their website as well from Coming Home International. Pretty excited to be able to see what's going to happen. We'll talk about that hopefully in the future. If we're getting some feedback from that and if we're hearing stories from other people, as I said, by the time you're seeing this, it's already out into the ether of the internet and the global airwaves. And so
let us know what you think. If you enjoyed it, we love hearing from you.
All right. With that, Jennifer, anything else?
No, we need to have another sip, so we
Cheers.
gotta go.
Cheers to you.
We can drink.
Thanks,
Cheers
thanks to all of you hanging out with us. Thanks to all of you who support the work that we do over at rosaryarmy.com/donate. We promise that does not pay for our martinis or our glasses of wine, but it does help us to be able to do this ministry on a daily basis. It's Friday night, remember when I said we're recording this? Pray your rosary every single day.
And do whatever it takes to be holy.
Talk to you again in a few days. Make them, pray them, give them away. God bless, folks.